Hello. Tonight we're going to talk about the question of what is worth teaching. Um, it's a study in pragmatism. So the idea of pragmatism is it practical to teach? A definition given for pragmatism, the pragmatism theory isn't very practical, in my opinion, but it says pragmatism theory, an approach that assesses the truth of meaning of theories or beliefs in terms of their success of their practical application. Okay, so what does that mean? Um, your practical application is things that you can do with your hands, things that you can do practically, right? Like fix a car, sew a dress, cook a meal. Those are all practical applications for the things that you're learning. So the idea of pragmatism is that same, what can we teach students so that they can have practical applications for it? Um, so my first slide, how would the subjects you teach hold up to the test of practical consequences? Um, when I was thinking about the reading and kind of really going over all of the comments that people left um, on my post and really praying about like what do I what is worth teaching for me, a lot of ideas came to my mind and it was pretty exciting. It was really fun to read this week and kind of be inspired on how I want my classroom to look. So, how would the subjects I teach, which is in science, hold up to the test of practical consequences? And I I thought about like chemistry. If the kids could walk around the school and find um, toxic spaces and then analyze those toxic spaces, and then apply that in a way that they could teach maybe the janitors to have a less toxic space, or maybe teach the landscapers around the school how to um, dilute their chemicals in a way that would help the grass to grow better. I think if I can engage the kids in that way in chemistry, I think they would really enjoy it. They would say, "Wait, if I dilute this, then it can be an acceptable amount." I think that it would be valuable to them. I was also thinking about, like earth science. I mean, we are surrounded where I'm from by volcanoes. And how can I engage the kids so that they're aware of what's in their own community, what they can look at? We can look at the lake, we can look at the volcanoes, we can look at the layering in the rocks. There's just so many things that we can engage in a practical way. So for me, I feel like it's pretty easy to make a, a practical assessment of my subject that I teach. But in the reading, apparently, it hasn't always been that way. In the 1800s, it was very much theory. They were reading theory about science. They weren't interacting with their community. So I feel grateful that we have moved to this point where it seems very simple to me to move science to a practical consequence. The next slide I have says, must a subject be practical to be taught in school? And John Dewey was my second reading this week. And he says, I believe that much of present education fails because it neglects this fundamental principle of the school as a form of community life. It conceives the school as a place where certain information is to be given, where certain lessons are to be learned, and where certain habits are to be formed. The value of these is conceived as lying largely in the remote future. The child must do these things for the sake of something else he is to do. They are mere preparations. As a result, they do not become a part of the life experience of the child, and so are not truly educative. John Dewey, 1916. So this idea is, he says, schools, they have reading, writing, and arithmetic, and then they get out into the real world and they're, maybe I don't know, caring for children, or maybe they're working in the steel mills, or this is 1916, right? This is kind of the industrial age. So they're not taking their reading, their writing, and their arithmetic for anything other than maybe accounting for their personal finances. Um, and signing the check at the end of the week. So how can we make what we're teaching practical to them? And if we aren't doing that, then we're failing, because we as educators are part of a bigger whole of this social experience for students. And so we need to be really aware of what socially they need, and then teach as practically that as we can. Okay, the next slide. I loved this idea of the squirrel and the human, and they're chasing each other around the tree, right? And the question is, like, does the human ever cross paths with the squirrel, or are they always, directly opposite of each other? And the author says, well, of course, you have to define what you mean by that. And this idea of pragmatism is really defining what we mean by what we're teaching, right? So when a student asks, when will I ever use this in real life? I'm going to use that as my gauge for what I'm teaching. When will I ever use this in real life can be a real eye-opening question if you let it be, and you give the students the power. Dewey talks about by putting the child's interest first, what does one sacrifice? And the only sacrifice that you have is this power in your classroom, right? So if you give the power to the student, how much more meaningful is their education going to become to them? And then finally, this last slide, and I love this because when I asked, what can we practically like oh, how was my question worded? Must a subject be practical to be taught in school? When I asked that, a lot of the comments I got back were this talk from Elder Oaks that talked about good, better, best. Now, the idea in this talk was this Sears magazine, right? So I have that image in the right-hand corner. You could look through the Sears magazine, and there were different prices, and the cheapest price was good, and the medium price was better, and the most expensive price was the best set that you could get. And he talks about how in life there's often a lot of good things that we can choose from. He said, we should begin by recognizing the reality that just because something is good is not a sufficient reason for doing it. The number of good things we can do far exceed the time available to accomplish them. Some things are better than good, and these are the things that should command priority and attention in our lives. So I just had a conversation with my sister really along these lines, and so I wanted to share it with you. She was talking about how in her finance class that she's taking, then she was reading about a student who every day when they got up in the morning, they started their day, they washed their face, they read their scriptures, and then they wrote a list. And on this list, they wrote all of the things that they could think of that they needed to do for the day. And then after they got the list written, then they kneeled down and said their prayers. And they said, Heavenly Father, I want to do the things that thou would have me do today. And here is my list. Is there anything else that you can think of that would be better for me to do? And so then this prayer becomes an interactive communication with Heavenly Father. And she waits. And she waits until she's inspired to write something else down. And I think that we can do that in our teaching. Heavenly Father, this is what I'm thinking about teaching. Is this the best thing that I can teach these kids? Because maybe my idea of like finding chemicals around the school is not the best thing that I can teach the kids. Maybe there's something else, but I'm not going to know that. But Heavenly Father will, because He has their best interest in mind too. So if I can include Him when I'm trying to figure out what to teach, I know that I will be blessed and my students will be blessed. So thanks for watching, and have a great night.